A buttery cake with a kick of coffee, hint of spices and a crumbly top is all you need to wake up from that afternoon slump. Let's see how to make this coffee crumble cake. The first component that we're going to make goes in the center of the cake. It has a huge hit of coffee along with a little bit of cinnamon and brown sugar. So those are the three ingredients that you need for your first components. So to this bowl of brown sugar, I'm going to add coffee. This is instant coffee that I'm using in the entire recipe. But if you want, you can use real coffee as well. Not here, but in the batter. Next, I'm adding in powdered cinnamon. And all you have to do is simply mix this. Our first component is ready. Let's move on to the second one. I'm going to start with a little bit of flour. The second component is a crumble that will go on top of the batter. So as it bakes, it's going to get really crunchy. The next ingredient is brown sugar. Remember the hint of spice that I was speaking about? We added cinnamon in the first component. In the second one, we are adding cardamom. Next, I'm adding in instant coffee powder again. So each component is going to have lots of coffee. And before I add in butter, I'm just going to lightly mix this. Now to turn this into a crumble, I'm going to add in butter. For this recipe, I'm using salted butter. That's why I'm not adding any pinch of salt to the entire recipe. But if you're using unsalted butter, make sure you add a little bit of salt just to balance things out. Roll the butter around into this dry mixture, making sure it crumbles as I'm moving it around. So the reason I'm using a fork first is so that the butter doesn't stick to my hands or melt because of the heat of my hands. So very lightly, I'm just going to mix it. The butter has started breaking already and has started to form smaller lumps. Now that this has a sandy texture, I'm going to take the fork out and switch over to my fingers. Lightly going to just toss everything around. Take a little bit of the mixture in your hands and press it. It should form a ball, and then when you try to break it, it should crumble again. So your crumble is now ready. Let's move on to the third component now. Time to make the third component. We're going to make the batter. So for that, I'm going to start with our dry ingredients. I have flour over here, to which I'm adding baking soda and baking powder. Make sure whenever you're baking, you're using the correct measurements while baking so that your end product is nice. Now that the dry ingredients are out of the way, let's move on to the wet ingredients. First, I'm going to make a shot of coffee. So I have a little bit of water here. This is warm water. So next, I'm adding in instant coffee. Now I'm going to add in sour cream. Make sure all the ingredients that you're using are at room temperature. Otherwise, it's going to curdle while you're making the batter. Next, I'm adding in yogurt. Whenever you're using yogurt in cakes, make sure it is very thick and it's not very thin like homemade yogurt. I'm going to give this a quick mix just to get rid of all the lumps from the sour cream and yogurt. They might look a little grainy, but it's fine. Nothing to worry about. Next, I'm adding in milk. Those are our wet ingredients. Now it's time for the last bit. Now today I'm using a mixture of white and brown sugar because brown sugar adds a nice earthy flavor to the cake. But if you want, you can go for all white sugar or all brown sugar as well. That's our brown sugar. I'm using dark brown sugar today. Next, I'm going to add in oil. And lastly, some salted butter. This again is soft and at room temperature. Time to cream this. Today I'm using an electrical whisk, but you can also do this by hand. So just start on low speed so that the sugar doesn't fly out everywhere. Start on low and then move on to medium and then high. The mixture has started to turn pale and fluffy. I'm just going to scrape down the bowl once so that nothing is stuck on the side. And I'm going to whisk this again for a couple of minutes. Now I'm going to scrape this down and add in half of my wet ingredients. Now I'm going to use a whisk to bring this all together. The wet ingredients might not mix completely with the butter mixture because obviously butter and water don't mix together. But it's fine, don't worry about it. It's all going to come together once you add the dry ingredients. Now I'm just going to lightly mix the dry ingredients first. and then add half of it. Now using a spatula, I'm going to just plainly mix it. No need to fold or anything, just mix it while scraping the sides. When almost all the flour is mixed in, add in the rest of your wet ingredients. Make sure you scrape down the bowl because all this is the part of the recipe. Time to add in the last bit of our dry ingredients. Now, if you don't know anything about baking and you're wondering why we are doing this in so many parts, then let me tell you why. If you add in the wet and dry ingredients all together, they're going to form tiny lumps of flour and tiny pockets of flour. This is going to give you a not so good batter. It might not rise evenly and all the ingredients will not get incorporated properly. Now dry ingredients are in, so we're going to use a spatula to mix this. Make sure you're not over mixing the batter because if you over mix, your cake might end up being tough and not so soft. So that is our third component. So our first, second and third components are ready. Now it's time to assemble it into the loaf pan. So I'm going to start with the third component, which is the batter. Now since this batter has a lot of butter in it, I'm not going to butter my pan. So there is nothing on this, but you should know that this is a non-stick pan. So that's why I'm not lining it at all. In case you're using an aluminum pan or a glass one, please butter it or use a parchment paper. So first I'm adding in half the batter. Now I'm just going to level this and push the batter up from the sides. So the reason that I'm doing this is so that when I add in my ribbon, which is the first component, it doesn't break the batter into half and give us two parts of a cake. So from the sides, the batter will touch each other and keep the cake intact. So now I'm just going to add in our ribbon mixture. This was dark brown sugar, coffee and cinnamon. You may or may not need all of it depending on the kind of pan that you're using. I'm just using half of this mixture because my pan is a little narrow. Now I'm going to top this off with the rest of my batter. Just add it in chunks so that it doesn't erode the bottom layer. After adding all the batter, just use your spatula to even the top layer out. No need to be fussy here. Now I'm going to top this off with our crumble mixture. So just take your crumble and add it all over this. Now just because I'm a little extra, I'm going to take the first component and spread it over the crumble. This is going to add a little bit of crunch along with that buttery crumble. Now it's time to bake this at 165 degrees Celsius. I'm using a low temperature here because the batter is quite thick and heavy. So this is going to take a lot of time to cook through the center. Now let's put this in the oven, and as usual, my oven is preheated. The coffee crumble cake has baked perfectly. Now I'm going to cool this on a rack so that it cools down properly from the bottom as well. This is going to take about 30 to 40 minutes. Let's unmold this beauty. I'm going to turn this over onto a chopping board and just lift the pan. Because it's non-stick, it's very easy to just lift it up. Let's slice through and have a look inside. The slice looks absolutely perfect. That ribbon that we added in the center has a nice wavy effect and it looks absolutely delightful. I can't wait to dig in. I read somewhere that a beautiful day begins with a cup of coffee. Let me make your afternoons better as well with a slice of this coffee cake. Try this recipe out and let me know how it turns out. I'll see you next time.